A quiet village well sat at the edge of town where the road began to climb into the hills. Each day, a beekeeper named Tom came here to water his hands after inspecting hives. The well was old and worn, with a handle polished smooth from years of use. One morning, as Tom knelt beside the well, he noticed a young woman standing nearby. She held an empty bucket, looking down into the dark water. Her name was May, and she lived alone in a small house at the edge of town where she tended a garden of medicinal herbs. "May I help you draw some water?" Tom asked gently. May looked up from the well. "Thank you," she said quietly, her voice soft as the morning mist clinging to the hillsides. Tom filled his bucket and handed it over. May nodded in thanks but did not smile or speak again until they were walking back toward her house together. The air was damp with recent rain, and small pools of water glittered on the path like forgotten jewels. As they approached her home, May paused beside a low fence covered with climbing roses. "I have some tea inside," she said without looking at Tom. "Would you join me?" In the cool house, May set out 2 cups and a simple clay teapot that steamed in the silence. They drank together in quiet comfort. Afterward, as they left her garden gate behind them, May paused to pick up a small stone from where it lay among the wildflowers. She examined it for a moment before handing it to Tom. "For you," she said softly. Tom accepted the gift without words. As he walked away from May's home, his hand closed around the smooth stone, feeling its weight and shape as if holding a piece of her garden in his palm. The sound of running water marked their last farewell, then only the whispering wind remained to carry with it the quiet understanding that neither had voiced aloud.
You're listening to the Empty Teahouse. The stone felt cool against her skin as she walked away from the beekeeper's garden, leading into late afternoon light where Maiko knelt beside her husband's grave.
In late afternoon light, Maiko knelt beside her husband's grave in the small village cemetery. She held a wooden bowl filled with offerings, rice balls, a bottle of sweet sake, and chrysanthemums fresh from their garden. The day was calm, almost dreamlike, save for the distant rumble of thunder. A man approached quietly behind Maiko. He paused, watching her offer water to the grave site, pouring it gently into the soil where her husband's ashes lay. She wiped her hands and looked up, meeting his eyes for the first time. He was older than she, with a kind face creased by years of labor. "Maiko," he said softly, nodding toward the bowl. "You've left much behind." "Yes," Maiko replied simply. "I thought I might share them." She gestured to the offerings and the man moved forward, taking a rice ball from the bowl, breaking it into pieces. He handed her one piece after another until they were both eating in silence. For some time, he did not speak. But as thunder rolled again overhead, he looked up. "It's like this every year," he said, more to himself than Maiko. "A storm just before the planting." Maiko nodded and watched his hands, rough from work, now picking at the last rice grains. "We planted by hand once," she offered quietly. "Long ago. I don't remember it anymore." She looked down at her own hands, smooth compared to the man's, wondering how much of her past had left them. The man turned back to her grave, nodding toward a large oak nearby. A single persimmon hung from its boughs, ripe and glowing in the late light. "Each tree knows its time," he said finally. "Like us." Maiko placed another handful of dirt over the offerings as if tending to something fragile. The man watched her, then reached into his pocket and pulled out a small stone, smooth and gray. He laid it beside Maiko's grave. "It has a place here now," he explained simply. Maiko took the stone in her hands, turning it gently. "It suits him." She placed it in her bowl, where it nestled among the remnants of rice and flowers. They did not speak again as she closed her eyes for a moment, breathing deeply. The sky darkened, but no rain came yet. As if sensing time's passage, Maiko stood up, straightening her kimono. The man rose too, nodding toward her offerings and then the grave. "Safe travels," he said quietly before turning away, walking slowly down the path that led back to town. Maiko watched him go, then turned back to face the oak. Its leaves whispered in the breeze. She reached up, touching the smooth bark for a moment, feeling its steady pulse. Then she moved toward home through the still-lit cemetery, holding her bowl close.
Her path was shadowed by an oak's long reach. Soon after, autumn sun dipped behind trees in a narrow alley between two clay walls, grandmother and granddaughter sitting on a wooden bench.
Late autumn in the quiet alley between two clay walls. The sun dips behind trees, casting long shadows that stretch across a narrow dirt path worn by generations of feet. A grandmother sits on an old wooden bench outside her cottage door, fingers working at braiding her granddaughter's hair. She is patient and methodical, each braid careful and tight. The little girl fusses, turning this way and that as the sunlight fades to gold edges around them. "Can I go play now?" she asks, tugging at her grandmother's sleeve. Grandmother hums a soft lullaby under her breath, without looking up from her work. The song carries notes of old tales and forgotten seasons. After a moment more of wrestling with strands and laughter, the girl finally stills and rests her head on her grandmother's knee. "Okay," she says softly. Inside the cottage, supper simmers in pots on the stone hearth. There is no hurry. Time moves differently here when dusk sets its quiet spell over everything. The alley smells of earth, wood smoke, and a hint of rain that's coming soon. Across from their bench stands another older woman, her hands busy at a small loom inside her own cottage. She watches the pair quietly, nodding to herself with satisfaction. In the past, she had once braided her grandchild's hair too, though it feels like centuries since those days. The sound of shoes approaching breaks the stillness. A man pauses in front of his neighbor's door, glancing curiously at the grandmother and child. He wears simple clothes and carries a worn leather bag slung over one shoulder. "Excuse me," he says softly to the woman on the bench. Grandmother looks up briefly from her work, but doesn't stop braiding. She smiles kindly and waves him closer. "You can sit," she offers, gesturing towards the empty side of the wooden seat beside them. The man steps forward hesitantly, settling next to her with a nod of thanks. They don't speak much as darkness deepens around them. The girl's braid is complete now. Grandmother ties off the end and strokes the child's hair fondly before she stands up, readying herself to take the little one inside for supper. "We should go," she says, tugging her granddaughter towards home. The man watches them leave with a thoughtful look, then turns back to the woman still at her loom across from him. He takes off his bag and opens it, pulling out several coins wrapped carefully in cloth. "These are for you," he says, placing them beside her door gently, without waiting for an invitation or acknowledgement. She nods silently, lifting her gaze just once to meet his eyes briefly before returning it back down to weave another strand through the small wooden needles. He turns and leaves as quietly as he came, heading off towards where others gather tonight under flickering lanterns. Back inside the grandmother's home, the hearth glows warmly. The little girl sits by it now with her own dolls arranged around her feet, singing softly to them in a voice that echoes the lullabies she heard earlier today. Outside, night falls fully over the quiet alley, bringing only stars and whispers of leaves rustling against clay walls. Inside another house across from them, the weaver finishes threading one last pattern through her loom's frame, then folds up her work carefully to be stored away for another day. In this moment's peace, she sets aside not just thread, but also any need for words or explanation.
The oak's shadow stretched longer as Wong walked away from the graveside, stepping into a snow-covered bamboo grove where he stood outside the gate.
A thin layer of snow covered the ground as Wang stood outside the gate to his bamboo grove. He pushed open a loose wooden panel and stepped inside, feeling the crunch underfoot. The sky was clear tonight, and stars shone bright above him. Beside one path leading into deeper woods lay an old man with hunched shoulders, breathing heavily. Wang paused beside him, then crouched down. "You're cold," Wang said. "What are you doing out here?" The old man looked up, his eyes sunken but clear in the starlight. "I wanted to see if someone would notice me." Wang took off his outer coat and draped it over the stranger's shoulders. He could feel the chill coming from the older man. "Come with me," Wang said, offering a hand to help him up. The old man hesitated, then placed his bony fingers in Wang's palm. Together they walked through the grove, branches scraping against their sleeves, making soft whispering sounds. Wang led the way back to his small house at the edge of the woods. Inside, he lit a fire and made tea, its steam rising up from 2 cups as if trying to reach out into the night sky. "You should rest," Wang said quietly, setting 1 cup down beside him. "Let's wait until morning to talk." The old man nodded, sinking lower onto a wooden stool. His breath came in short gasps, and his gaze never left the flames dancing on the hearth. Morning light seeped into the room through paper windows as Wang stirred over a pot of porridge. He looked up from his work when the man beside him stirred awake, blinking against the daylight filtering through cracks in the walls. "Thank you," he said softly, nodding toward the food and warmth that had been offered to him. Wang simply smiled, handed him a bowl of warm porridge. They ate quietly, the sounds of wooden spoons scraping against bowls filling their small world for a few minutes. After breakfast, Wang showed the stranger where his sleeping mat was rolled out on the floor near the hearth, inviting the old man to stay as long as he needed until he felt well enough again. The fire crackled and popped in the morning silence between them, sending tendrils of smoke through the roof. Later that afternoon, when the sun angled itself lower in the sky, Wang found himself standing beside the bamboo grove's gate again. This time, though, there was someone else standing there too, a stranger who had become a visitor. Wang smiled at him gently, then walked back inside, closing the door behind him softly. On his way to the hearth where the last wisps of smoke were curling up towards the sky, he paused just long enough to straighten a fallen leaf that lay on the threshold, out of place in the warm house. Outside, as the day's light faded into dusk once more, 2 wooden panels creaked closed at the gate.
Dusk settled over the grove with shadows long across the gate. Soon after, in the quiet village tea house at dusk, an old farmer sat alone by a window.
In the quiet village tea house at dusk, where light dimmed and smoke from oil lamps lingered in small clouds, an old farmer sat alone by a window looking out over empty streets. The air carried whispers of autumn, crisp and cooling, as if nature too was settling into stillness. Outside, his son's former room waited with closed doors, empty but for memories. Tonight, the young man who used to be a boy would not return from the city, and so this place felt more hollow than usual. The farmer sipped at his tea, the warmth seeping through his fingers like lost time. Beside him slipped in someone new, a widow, her face worn but kind, carrying small bundles of greens she had gathered from her garden. She placed them on a nearby table and ordered some tea without looking back, already absorbed by the simple task before her. They said little to each other at first, only acknowledging presence with brief smiles when their eyes met. The widow began sorting her greens under the dim light, her fingers moving swiftly through leaves like she knew them well, old friends now more precious than ever for their company. The farmer watched, feeling a kind of kinship in this quiet work. When he noticed how neatly she wrapped each bunch with twine, something stirred within him, a reminder perhaps of his own hands once busy in the fields. "Allow me," he offered, gesturing toward her pile of greens that needed tying. She looked up, startled by his offer but not unkindly so. "You?" He nodded, reaching for a bundle and beginning to tie it with practiced ease from years spent binding bundles of rice and hay. She watched him in silence, appreciating the effort now as much for the act itself as what it meant. Soon, they worked side by side, their hands moving rhythmically between tying twine and sorting greens. A comfortable quiet hung between them, thick but not uncomfortable, shared understanding without words needed. The widow handed over a few small items she no longer wanted: old teacups, a pair of scissors, and the farmer packed these into his bag. When all was done and their work set neatly on the table, the widow looked at him with genuine gratitude shining in her eyes. "Thank you," she said simply, warmly. He bowed slightly, feeling unexpectedly light, as if by helping another he had somehow found a way to ease the weight of loss that hung heavy around his own heart. She returned his nod and left quietly into the dusk, leaving behind only her scent and the lingering sound of her footsteps fading down the street. The farmer sat for a while longer, staring out at shadowed houses where others lived their separate lives. Then he stood up, packed away any trash or remnants from their work together neatly on the table as if to leave no trace but also some small gift in its stead. His hand brushed against her scissors briefly before placing them carefully beside his bag. Outside, the air was cooler now, with an approaching chill that urged a pace toward home. Yet inside him, there lingered something warmer than tea and softer than shadows, the quiet sense of shared existence, fleeting yet profound as autumn leaves falling in the night.
The lantern flame swayed once, steadied again as empty streets whispered of autumn's approach. We close the door now. Until tomorrow.